The Airbnb host said, "Don't open the attic." I did. The burnout had been a slow creeping frost, starting at the edges of my life and finally crystallizing over my very core. Late nights staring at lines of code, the incessant ping of notifications, the gray city skyline, it had all leached the color from my world. My therapist, in her infinite, pastel-hued wisdom, suggested a digital detox. "Go somewhere with trees, Alex," she'd said. "Somewhere the only signal you get is from your own soul." And so I found the Gables, a stone cottage nestled in a quiet valley that looked like it had been lifted from a Wordsworth poem. The pictures on the app showed a charming, ivy-choked exterior and a cozy interior with a massive hearth. The reviews were glowing, all 5 stars mentioning the blissful silence and the gracious host, a man named Elias. He was waiting for me on the porch, a stooped figure with hands like knotted roots and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He smelled of wood smoke and damp earth. "Welcome, Alex," he said, his voice a low rumble. He gave me a brief tour, the kitchen with its slate countertops, the living area dominated by the fireplace, the shockingly comfortable-looking bedroom. It was perfect. "Just one house rule, really simple," Elias said as he handed me a heavy, ornate iron key. His gaze flickered upwards towards the ceiling in the hallway. I followed it and saw a square hatch with a dangling pull cord. "The attic. Just leave it be. It's for storage. Dusty, full of spiders. Nothing you'd want to see." "No problem," I said with an easy smile. The last thing I wanted was to root through some old man's junk. I was here for peace, quiet, and a dangerously large stack of novels. The first night was bliss. I built a roaring fire, drank a glass of wine that was probably too expensive, and fell asleep to the sound of wind whispering through the pines. The silence was so profound, it felt like a physical presence. On the second night, the silence broke. I was jolted awake around 3 a.m. by a sound from directly above my bed. A soft, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. The house settling, I told myself, rolling over and pulling the thick duvet over my head. But then came a long, scraping sound, like a heavy wooden chair being dragged across bare floorboards. My logical, code-driven brain tried to find an explanation, a loose branch on the roof, an animal perhaps. But the sound was too deliberate, too internal. The next day, I tried to ignore it. I went for a long hike, breathing in the crisp, clean air, letting the sheer greenness of the valley wash over me. But as dusk settled, a chill seeped into the house that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature outside. I'd be reading in the living room, and a pocket of frigid air would drift past me, raising goosebumps on my arms. I started catching things in my peripheral vision. A flicker of movement in the darkened hallway, a shape in the reflection of a window that vanished when I turned to look. That night, the sounds were worse. The thumping and scraping were joined by what sounded like faint, frantic scratching, and over it all, a low, guttural murmur. It wasn't a language I could identify. It felt inverted. Sleep became a distant memory. I was jumpy, irritable. My peaceful retreat had become a cage with an unseen, noisy neighbor. My rationality was fraying. I found myself staring at the attic hatch, the pull cord swaying ever so slightly in a draft I couldn't feel. Elias's warning wasn't just a request anymore. It was a challenge. What was he storing up there that made such a racket? Raccoons on meth? The breaking point came on the 4th night. I was lying in bed, tense and wide-eyed, when a new sound joined the cacophony. A single, sharp crack, like a dry twig snapping. Then, silence. A profound, watchful silence that was somehow more terrifying than the noise. After a minute, A whisper snaked down from the ceiling. It was faint, sibilant, and seemed to curl directly into my ear. It sounded like my name. XO, LA. That was it. My fear was finally eclipsed by a desperate need for answers. I grabbed the heavy flashlight from the nightstand, my heart hammering against my ribs. In the hallway, I reached up, my trembling fingers closing around the worn cord. With a sharp tug, the hatch creaked open, and a set of rickety wooden stairs unfolded, groaning in protest. A wave of cold, musty air washed over me, carrying a scent of dried lavender and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like old blood. I climbed, each step a thunderclap in the oppressive quiet. The attic was vast, the flashlight beam cutting a nervous swath through the darkness. It was cluttered, just as Elias had said, shrouded furniture, stacked boxes, cobwebs thick as cotton candy. On a small corkboard pinned to a wooden support beam, I saw a cluster of photographs. I moved closer, my light trembling. They were Polaroids, slightly faded. The first one was of the bed downstairs. My bed. A lump of ice formed in my stomach. The second was a close-up of a sleeping figure tangled in the duvet. My breath hitched. It was me. My face, slack with sleep. The photo must have been taken 2 nights ago. My light darted around the room, searching for a camera, a hidden lens, anything. I saw more photos. A man I didn't recognize, sleeping. A young woman, her mouth slightly agape. Dozens of them, all sleeping in that same bed. We were a collection. My gaze fell on a small, leather-bound journal lying on a dusty trunk. It was locked with a small brass clasp. Frantic, I rattled it, but it was secure. Then my light caught something on the floorboards at the far end of the attic. A second door. This one was squat, made of thick, dark oak, and secured with a heavy iron bolt. The wood around the frame was splintered and gouged with deep scratches. They weren't from the outside trying to get in, they were from the inside, trying to get out. As I approached, the reversed murmuring started again, louder this time, coming from behind that very door. My curiosity had curdled into pure, primal terror. I had to know. I knelt, pressing my eye to the ancient, oversized keyhole. Darkness. Then, a flicker of movement. An eye, wide and bloodshot, stared back at me. It was an eye consumed by a horror I couldn't comprehend. Then, a voice whispered from the keyhole, desperate and chillingly clear, despite its backward cadence. Plehem, plehem, plehem. My blood ran cold. I knew that voice. In that distorted, inverted plea, I recognized the timbre, the pitch, the sound of my own desperation. It was me. A tidal wave of panic crashed over me. I scrambled back, stumbling over a crate, and crab-walked towards the hatch. I had to get out. I had to get out now. I reached the opening and looked down into the warm, inviting light of the hallway below. Just as my foot found the top rung of the ladder, a deafening slam echoed through the attic. I whipped my head around. The heavy oak door at the far end of the room was now slightly ajar, a sliver of profound darkness visible in the gap, and the hatch to the hallway below slammed shut. The force of it shook the entire floor. The pull cord whipped upwards, retracting into the ceiling like a snake vanishing into a hole. I was plunged into absolute darkness, my flashlight having skittered away across the floor. Panic gave way to a chilling, soul-crushing realization. I was trapped. I heard the sound of a car pulling up the gravel driveway outside. The front door of the cottage opened. I heard Elias's low, rumbling voice. "Welcome," he was saying to someone new. "So glad you could make it." The place is all yours. Just one house rule? Really simple. I started screaming, beating my fists against the unyielding wood of the hatch. But the sound was swallowed by the thick walls, by the ancient history of the house. I stumbled back in the dark, my hands hitting the rough, splintered wood of the second door. It was closed again, bolted from the outside. I was on the other side of it now. I was the thing in the dark. The memories in my head began to blur, replaced by ghostly faces of those who came before. I opened my mouth to scream for help, but the only sound that came out was a distorted backward whisper, joining the chorus of the trapped. Txe en eroi, plehem plehem.